So this is a little quiz here. Does anybody know where that, especially those of you that live in the Treasure Valley, anybody know where this is? This location? Anybody identify that spot? It's the West Y. Yeah, good. Usually people don't get that. So this is 1994. And I heard so much in your presentations that's really going to be a bit redundant. I heard the word mindset a lot, and I love that word. I'm going to talk about that later, a growth mindset and getting everybody around the same mindset. But I think leadership, and part of it is thinking about possibilities. And I'm going to use a lot of words that begin with P, but sometimes there's a better word. And I have plan up here. Plan's important, but dreaming is important. And what I've understood, and I got to sit with Director Ness, and I've admired his work, and I've seen what's happened. But the two of us talked, and I know he made comments earlier about the importance of every single person on the team, and he's so right. The only time you ever get things done is when you have a shared vision, when you can create a shared vision, and you forget about who owns it, who created that vision. Now, sometimes you don't forget. Maybe the best example in my lifetime of a shared vision, too, I'm going to give you, for those of you that are old enough to remember, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. I'd love to, can I give homework here? I'd love to have everybody just go back. It's a very brief speech, but I want you to listen to that sometime in the next week. It was vivid. It was scary. It was out there. Have we achieved King's dream? No. But have we made progress because he put it out there? And it became shared. It wasn't just his dream. It was our dream. Then maybe the one that was the last time I can remember, honestly remember this country coming together. 9/11 we came together. We've come together around crises. But there's a time when John F. Kennedy said, we're going to land a man on the moon within the decade. I was alive when he said that. We were behind the Russians. They sent up Yuri Gagarin, and Sputnik was ahead of us, and we were nervous about that. But when he said it didn't matter whether you were conservative, liberal, libertarian, it didn't matter where you came from. Everybody got behind that vision, and that's how we get things done. So I love the statement. We've all heard the statement, I'll believe it when I see it. I like to think about, I'll see it when I believe it. If you can really get to believing something, and if as a team you believe that, it's amazing what we can get done. And it's about focusing on what we can do and not what we can't do. One of the blessings I have two kids. My youngest son's special needs. He's 40 years old now. He lives independently. He actually lives in a home, drives a car, has a full-time job. But when he was born, there's no specific diagnosis, but I can remember my wife and I just wondering, boy, when can we get him normal, whatever normal is? Gosh, what can we do? And we heard, you don't use all your brain. Well, maybe if we get him to use a greater percentage of your brain, and we spent all this time on that, and then we start. It was my wife who usually, this is the way it is, who was much smarter, said, why are we worrying about what he can't do? Let's focus on what he can do. And that's really helped shape my purpose in life, is how do you find, I detest the word at-risk kid. Everybody got a picture of an at-risk kid? Anybody want to be an at-risk kid in here? Or have an at-risk kid? How about flipping that and saying every kid is of promise? That's what we've done. At the Y, I did all the new employee orientations, and I would tell people that if you really can't get your arms around that, if you don't believe that every single kid, not 98% of them, every single kid is of promise, I don't want you working here. Because we can't have a place that's ready to give up on kids. I was one of those kids who needed help, who needed somebody to believe in me before I believed in myself. It is always about possibility, and I love this picture. This little girl is in a program that we ran at the Y called P16. So much of this in our families, I look around and I would say in the majority of our families, it's an automatic. You're going to learn to swim. You're going to go to college. These things that we think about. And I'm making that's a little broad generalization, but for some families, it's so far from the radar screen. And it's just about giving kids opportunities to do things that they might not otherwise get to do. And it reminds me, this little girl, she was in an art class, and kids are great. I'm a grandpa, and I love the things they say and the things they do. And she was in school and didn't really like school all that much. She was kindergarten, got kind of fidgety, so she was doing her artwork, and she's sitting there coloring away on her, and the activity was starting to go a little long. The teacher was about ready to change activities, so she came up next to the little girl and peered over her shoulder and said, "Oh, honey, that's beautiful. What are you drawing?" And the little girl didn't hesitate. She said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." The teacher, kind of like, well, that's interesting because no one knows what God looks like. And the little girl said immediately, well, they will in a minute. I love that story, and I'm sorry if you've heard me before and you've heard that story, but I tell it almost every time because it gets a laugh. But I want you to think about that a little bit. So that's a kid in kindergarten. No one's going to tell her she can't draw a picture of God. Go to a kindergarten class and ask who would like to sing in front of the class. Who'd like to do a solo? Who'd like to come up and dance? There'll be hands going up, oh, pick me, pick me. Then go to a junior high class. Ask the same question. If you can get eye contact, what's happened? No one can sing in a junior high class? What's happened? We've started to tell kids, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Oh, that's not very good. You didn't, and we do it in so many ways. You do it in our gifted and talented programs. What are you if you're not gifted and talented? Everybody's gifted and talented. In Finland, the best education system in the world right now, they don't have gifted and talented. There's no excuse. You can't take the no math track because they believe everybody's gifted and talented. And what we do in sports at an earlier and earlier age, we've got the select teams, and no, we got to give kids opportunities to believe in themselves and the possibilities. So I'm a big believer in that. This is a quote from Robert F. Kennedy that I love. It's about asking the why not. That's how you get amazing things done. And you've been asking a lot of those questions, especially of late. I like that. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I do want audience participation. How many of you in here are leaders? Raise your hand if you're a leader. How many of you are leaders? Raise your hand if you're a leader. I don't see it. There's a couple hands I don't see. How many of you are leaders? Raise your hand if you're a leader. Good. That's what I want. Every one of you. How many of you are role models? How many of you are role models? Every hand ought to go up. The choice you have is what kind of a leader you're going to be, what kind of a role model you're going to be. It's not an option, whether you are one or not. And it's not about titles. And Director Ness hit that on the head. Your title doesn't make you more or less important or have more impact. How you conduct yourself it is what makes that difference. One of my role models is the guy in this picture, John Ferry. Some of you may know John, ran Boise Cascade, and you look at him, it's a great picture. He looks like a, rugged Western guy. And I do love, we were talking, I'm originally from Michigan. I've been out here for about 40 years, love Idaho. I feel like an Idahoan now, and I love almost everything about Idaho. One thing I don't like about the West is this attitude that people say, I'm a self-made man, I'm a rugged, independent. Baloney. If you got to a place where you were successful in life, you had help. Period. You had help. Now, John, I know, grew up in a single-parent family, but he had teachers, he had coaches, he had people at the Y. The reason he got involved with us at the Y is the Y took him in at a time where he was struggling. We all have those. So we need to be mentors, and we need to find mentors. And we need to have our purpose. And Shar, thanks for mentioning what mine is. But can you boil down in 6 to 10 words what your purpose is? Why are you here? I loved in the video, you got to know why. We spend a lot of time on how and what, but until you know why, it's hard to get things done. But once you know why, and everybody believes in that why, you can move mountains. So I think, we need to find callings in life. And we need to find our own purpose in life. Next one is principles and philosophies, and some people would call these values, and values is probably a better word, but I'm going with my P theme here. These are two of the kids I coach in Special Olympics, and I learned so much. I say I coach, I get coached by these kids. It's Amy and Jeff in this picture, and I hope, I tell you this, if you ever are having a bad day, 7 o'clock, Boise High, Wednesday nights, come over and visit. I promise I'll make your day. Amy's pretty profoundly impaired. I could talk about all the things Amy won't get. She will probably never get a driver's license, never own a home, never hold down a job for pay. There's a whole bunch of things that we could talk about. She's maybe the happiest person I've ever met. Every time I walk in the gym, I get a big hug and I get a smile. Jeff is as loving and kind a person as I've ever met. So when I think about values, and I'm not going to do this exercise here, we'd lose control, but I've done this a few times. I pass out a list of values, and I ask you to fill out, they're listed for you, and I say, you can add some to the list if you want, But I want you to start by picking your top 8 values, the ones that are most important to you in your life. Not necessarily corporate values, but how you want to live your life when you're at your best. Then I ask you to get it down to 5 and then get it down to 3. And then I will read values off and say, please stand if I read your value, one of the ones you had as your top 3. And the first one I always use is love. And invariably, at least half the room stands up around love. It never takes me more than 5 words to get an entire room standing up. We spend so much time talking about differences and this group and that group. And guess what? We got so much more in common than we have that's different. And once we understand that, it's awesome when somebody's different. It's exciting to learn about them, to understand their culture. We gotta come around that. We're all humans. And I don't know if you have to be moved when you see a picture of a kid in Syria, blood on their face. They got a mom, they got a dad. Hopefully they got a mom and a dad. Maybe they don't, but they're kids that shouldn't be living in those kind of conditions. The older I get, the more important I think I place importance on the value of empathy. Not sympathy, but empathy. I'm going to give you another homework assignment, 4 minutes long. Go to Cleveland Clinic Empathy and watch that video. Watch it with somebody you love. If you've got older kids, watch it with them. Cleveland Clinic Empathy. It's awesome. Nobody wants sympathy, but empathy, trying to understand where somebody's come from. I heard, so I'm going through a list of some of the values that I think are important. A principle of work, and I think it happens a lot here, and I heard it in the, people going to the break room. MBWA, anybody know what MBWA stands for? Yep, management by walking or wandering around. So that's how you find out. Go out and meet with people. Don't isolate yourself. Catching people doing things right. Look for what's going right in a situation. There's a great book called Switch, if you want to make change. How many of you like change? That's another question. Raise your hand. Okay, I don't see as many hands go up. So, any of you have goals? Do any of you have goals? Are you going to get to those goals without change? Probably not. So, I asked this of my swim team. I said, how many like change? Almost no hands went. So, you want to swim no faster today than you're going to swim at the end of the year? Of course they want to swim faster. It's going to take some change. It's going to take some work. But the principle around change is you look for the bright spots. Go to what's working right. A complaint is a gift. How many of you think you like that statement? It is. I mean, you're going to get them. The minute you stop getting complaints, it means you're not listening. Nobody wants to come to you. If you're getting them, you ought to go, cool. Because they came to you because they actually think you're going to listen and you're going to do something about it. Don't disappoint them. And then I love this one. I forget who it was. It was talking about how her day was made. And you shared the story. Where was that? Who said that? I think it was about the break room, wasn't it? That isn't that tough. What if you make a pledge yourself? Every day I'm going to make at least one person's day. Is that hard? Is that really going to be that difficult? I'll give you one story about that. I spoke to a group of kids at CUNA, in the CUNA schools years ago, and it's one of the toughest assignments you ever get is there were 4th graders all the way up to seniors in high school. That's a hard audience but I'm not going to talk about that. What happens, though, is the kids would show up in waves. The elementary kids would show up, and then the high school kids in this little room. And I got there early, and the first girl to show up was a 4th grade girl. Her name was Claire. She looked like she was about, in first or second grade, little tiny girl. I was trying to be nice and friendly, and she must have heard, don't talk to strangers. And she was really, you could tell, really nervous. And I'm doing the best I can, but I'm not, nothing's working. Then the next bus that arrived was the high school kids, and the first kid to get off this bus was this big, tall, about 6'4", big, wide shoulders, handsome kid, walks in, he's wearing his football jersey, he walks in the room, and he says, Claire, what did you do to your hair? I love your hair, Claire. I thought I'd have to get a mop and mop Claire off the floor because she had melted. Now, was that big a deal for him to say that? But I had never met the guy, but I loved that guy from the moment I met him. How nice is that for some big man on campus to take 1 second to just tell Claire he loved her hair? We can do that. There isn't a person in this room that can't do that every single day. Got to have a grandkid picture in here, This is my grandson. Question I'm going to ask you, when was the last time you were this happy? Over a red ball. Kids laugh something like 120 times a day. I'm hearing a lot of laughter in here. I bet you've laughed more today than you do on a regular day. Let's do that more often. I also have to put this one in because it's part of my problem. It's okay to cry too. You know, it was hard as a male growing up in my era. You know, we're not supposed to cry. Well, it's usually tears of joy for me. Sometimes it's tears of sadness, but I don't have any ulcers. So it's okay to let it out. We're not robots. And kids show us that with just absolute joy. These kids, there's a video, and it's not very long, but they've been on the Today program. They have been to the Waldorf Astoria. They've been all over. And it's not obvious in this picture. I'll show you a picture later on, but the one in the front here, this is Lucas and Noah. Lucas, the one in the front, has got a disease called lissencephaly, which basically it's a smooth brain. He can't speak. He has no control over almost any of his bodily functions, except you can see that smile. In fact, my son described him to his kids, my grandkids, when they first met Lucas. They said, Lucas talks with his eyes. Well, he's profoundly impaired, but these kids have done triathlons and again, thinking about the possibility, they do them together. But when Noah, the older boy, was on the Today program, I believe it was Matt Lauer that asked him, he said, what do you like about your brother? What's so great about your brother? And he said, it didn't take him a millisecond. He said, he's perfect. I'll show you a picture later on of him. And not many of us would describe him as perfect, but he does. And who's to tell us he's not perfect? I'm not going to. And Amy's perfect. You know, perspective drives attitude. And my Special Olympians, they teach me every day. There's a little girl, not so little girl. Remember when we hosted the World Winter Games here? Were you around? That was one of the coolest things. We had our blue scarves, and there's this camaraderie among people. If you had your scarf on, you know, I'd see people across the street, and you'd wave to them. You never would have done that. It was awesome. It was about inclusion and everybody having value. So this girl, she's in the World Winter Games. She's a cross-country skier. She's trained really hard. The myth is that these kids are competitive. Now, the truth is they get over it a lot quicker than we do. But they are competitive. They want to win. They train. So this girl's in cross-country skiing. She's trained hard. She's up at, I think this was up at Brundage. She's local, so she's got a big contingent of family and friends there to cheer her on. And she gets to the starting line. She takes off, takes about 5 strides down the track skiing, and her ski comes off. She falls down. She gets down. She's special needs. It takes her a little longer to put a ski on, but she puts it back on, gets back up. By now, the pack's moved away from her. She starts to catch up, comes off again. This happens about 5 or 6 times. She finishes dead last by a long way. Her family, friends, her coaches are there. She's got about 30 people there, and they don't know what to say. They're really bummed. And she's over there with her back to them, you know, probably about from here to the door. They start moving over close to her. They get about 10 feet away from her, and she turns around. She's got a big smile on her face, and the very first thing she says is, "Did you see me get up?" Raise your hand if you would have said that. This is a time we wouldn't. It's perspective. The one thing that was right is she got up every time. She could have sat down. She could have stayed down. Many of us would have. She could have found an attorney to sue the ski company that made that ski. But that wasn't she got up. That's what we do. So these are the triathletes here. And we asked the question, why not? You know, why can't they do a triathlon? And at the time we decided they were going to do one, Noah didn't even know how to swim. He pulls his brother in a raft. He pulls him behind on a bike, and then he pushes him on a run. And to see the smile, and it's awesome. So if you ever have any excuses about not getting them moving, you know, talk to these guys. It reminds me of all these kids. Perspective is so important. We had a kid in our child care program, and single parent family. We got a lot of kids, and I grew up in a single parent family, and so I know what that's like. Mom, you know, in my case it was mom. In this case it was mom, working hard, doing everything she could. Didn't have enough money to pay for child care, and then they finally found out about another program called the Idaho Child Care Program, which provides some assistance. Got her kid into a child care center. It wasn't a Y child care center, but it was a reputable center, or so they thought. Got him there, and the first week he's there, the mom asks him how his day was going. When you pick up your kids, if you've got kids, you know how it works. You go pick them up and you say, "How's your day today, Nick?" He said, "Oh, bad, awful. I'm a bad kid. I'm rotten. I'm no good." This is a 5-year-old kid telling his mom. that he's no good. Well, that didn't come out of nowhere. So she's troubled by that, but didn't have any options. So she kept him in the center. The next week, the mom was met at the door by the director of the child care center. Said, don't bring Nick back tomorrow. He's getting kicked out of child care at 5. So the mom didn't know what to do. Fortunately, long story short, she knew somebody from the Y, a neighbor, took her to the Y. I had zero to do with this. They walked in the next day. They got this kid into our child care center the very next day. He comes in and he fits right in and seeming to do pretty well. The mom is a little hesitant to ask him how his day's going, though. Last time that answer wasn't very good. She waits about a week. After 1 week, she says, all right, Nick, how's it going? How was your day? This time he says, he's got a big smile on his face, says, great, I'm a kid of character. Now you tell me how a kid goes from a no good, rotten, awful kid to a kid of character. How does that happen? It happens because of the way we treat him, the belief we have in him. Shame on us to ever tell a kid that he's a no good, rotten kid. They may do things that are wrong, but they're not rotten. And he is a kid of character. His mom's gotten remarried. He is in a gifted and talented program in the Boise schools. How many of you know this guy? Vincent Katuku. Every time you see him, his greeting is, I am blessed. How about that for a greeting? And he has bad days, I'm sure. He grew up in Kenya. He's lost family members, but he's blessed. And aren't we? If we ever forget how blessed we are. And then Becky, one of my other heroes, I could talk about her all day, but lost her leg when she was a teenager. And if you ever hear somebody coming up behind you in a triathlon or in a road race, get out of her way. She's probably about to pass you. But it's all about attitude. It's about play, too. You need to find times to play and to be present and to have some downtime. It can happen in different ways. One, I worked at the Y. I'm now a swim coach. Movement's got to be part of it. Sitting is the new smoking. We got to get up and move. Find ways to move. It's great to do that. But reading a book can be play. You can get lost, but find ways to get away from the day-to-day activities and some unstructured play. This is another picture of my grandkids. No one's telling them to go run on the beach. No one's telling them we're going to do this for 5 minutes. It's just the way kids play. And we got to get back to some of that. I could talk all day about sports and what's wrong. I love sports, but so much of it is so structured. It's win at all costs. Sometimes we just need to encourage people to play. And then another P word, presence, and I didn't put that on here, but being fully present. When you're fully present, and the gift of boredom with kids. And how about you? Do you ever have time where you just, if we find white space, we tend to fill it. It's okay to have some white space. That's where the creativity comes from. And so with our kids, sometimes you have to give them the gift of boredom. How many of you as kids had more fun with a box than the toy was in it? But now it's all, we've got to entertain them, and we don't need to do that. Peace is the next one. We got to be at peace with ourselves. Do you put your head on the pillow every night and know that you've made the world a little better place? I can pretty much tell you have. You've done something good for the world. Have you made somebody's day every day? This guy I don't think has to worry about that, by the way. And then our expectations, we talked a lot about that. Growth mindset is huge. Having a growth mindset that if I work at it, if I try, and with your kids, read about growth mindset, because don't tell them they're gifted. Don't tell them they're talented. Tell them they earned it, they worked for it. Teach them that it does with anything. If we work at it, we can get better. There's a teacher that took over a poor school district, and she created a new grading system, A, B, C, and NY. Anybody know what NY stood for? Not yet. But someday. Another teacher came in and she had a kid, the first test he took it, 20 questions, he only got 2 right, 18 wrong. Normally in a class, what are you going to see? A big frowny face, red ink, and a -18. You know what she put on the paper? A smiley face and a +2. +2 means you're on the road. -18 sucks the life out of you. This is a picture. I won't tell you the whole story on this guy, but this guy was in Iraq about 3 years before this. We live in a great country. There's a lot of debate going on around that. Can we get better? For sure. Do we have a lot of work? But to think of a kid who was in a relocation, he was actually in Syria in a relocation camp. We had YMCA Day at the White House, and I got to take one person, He was the youngest guy of all the Ys that went. Most people took mayors and dignitaries. I got to take this guy, and I just love the symbolism of that kid. He's going to be a doctor. He's going to school at Boise State. We live in a country that provides those kind of opportunities, and we ought to be pretty darn blessed or grateful for that. Also, it reminds me of a couple of other P words, patience and persistence. If you've got a plan and a purpose and a shared vision, then you can be patient and persistent. And finally, we've all got to pay it forward. This is one of my great friends, a guy named Bert. This was his 100th birthday. This was up at our Y camp. We've taken him up there on his birthday for the last few years, and he wanted to go down the zip line this year. And we decided that probably wasn't a great idea, but we were going to take him out on a canoe ride. And it started to thunder and lightning. We said, "What do you want to do, Bert?" He said, "I want to dance." So on his 100th birthday, I mean, this is something for if you have a goal. Wouldn't you like to be dancing on your 100th birthday? And he wasn't just dancing. He's out there putting some moves on. Then we did a conga line, and I'm watching him, and he's just kind of shuffling along. And all of a sudden, you see him, he's watching the kids, and all of a sudden he goes. So it's about paying it forward, and it's about knowing that you're always growing, you're always getting better, and that's what I love about Bert. You can ask kids the question, what have you learned in life? And they'll give you different answers. You can ask those of us that are a little older. One of my favorite ones from a girl, they said, "What have you learned in life?" She said, "I've learned never to ask my mom if her diet is working." Pretty good answer. But what I love, if you ask somebody like Bert, some of the people that I admire the most, a guy that was 94 years old, asked him, "What have you learned in life?" He said, "I've learned that I still have a lot to learn." That's the kind of person I want to work with. I appreciate being here with you. I very much appreciate what you do. And this conference looks like it's great. You are on the summit. I enjoyed the presentations. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you on behalf of all of us that use the services you provide and are delivered by people you could work any place you want to work. You've got the talent to be, you choose to be working for the government, working for us, and you guys get it. So thank you.